Okay, so here's where we left off from last time. I expanded my blank spaces a little bit just to make kind of a neat little design. I've got it so that I can swap my pieces, they destroy, and when they refill, the columns collapse and they refill around this blank space that I have. I also have it so that if I pull into the blank space, I'm not causing any errors. So what I'd like to do now is create tiles that are similar to the jelly tiles from Candy Crush that should be pretty familiar to you. What a jelly tile is it's a tile that goes behind the piece, and when a match is made over that, then it either breaks a little or disappears completely. And the jelly tiles can be used to create a requirement for the level to be completed. And we can implement that later. But for now, I just want to go through how to get them into the scene and working so that when you make a match over them, they kind of start to degrade. So, very first thing I want to do is I want to use an art asset that I added to our project way back. It's this rounded square here. What I want to do is I want to set this to be the correct number of pixels per unit. Right now it's 100 pixels per unit. If I jump over to my scene here and I pull this in, it's going to be gigantic. I don't want it to be quite that big. So I'm going to do a little less than 512, or sorry, a little more than 512, so it's a little less than a full unit. And the reason I want to do that is just so that it's not smashing up against every other one. So I'm going to put it to 524 pixels per unit. I'm going to leave the filter alone and I'll click apply. And if I look at this now, it's just barely less than one full Unity unit. I might actually want to go a little more, a little less with it there. So my dot's at 768. I'm going to put this at, let's say, 64 more than 512, which is 576. And then I'll click apply. And that looks better. If I have two of these right next to each other, there'll be a little gap between them, which is good. Alright, so I'm going to rename this object from Squircle to Breakable Tile. And I'm going to add to it my background tile script. And I'm going to add this to my prefabs. So in my prefabs, I will just add it in there. You'll see it turn blue, and now I can delete it from my scene. Now, as far as the scripting goes, there's two scripts I want to look at. One is that background tile script, and the other one is my board script. So I'm going to go into my scripts here. I'm going to open these up. I didn't have them open to start with, so I'll meet you back here once my scripts are open. Alright, so I have my background tile script open here, and it's pretty empty from what we were messing with last time. What I want to do to this is I want to add an integer value, which is going to be how many, I don't know, we'll call it hit points it has. So I'll call this public int. Yeah, I might as well just call it hit points. What I want to do as well is I want to create a method in here that's public that allows me to subtract from the hit points. So I'll say public integer value, or sorry, this is an integer, this is going to be a void, and I'll call this take damage, and this is going to require a parameter of how much damage it needs to take. So what I'll do here is I'll just do hit points minus equals damage. So that's just going to subtract from the hit points whatever the value of the damage is. I'm going to create another method here. I'm going to call this my update method. So void update. And in my update method, I'm going to constantly be checking what the hit points are. So we'll say if hit points less than or equal to 0, then I'm going to destroy this .game object. And there's a little more logic I'm going to have to add to this, but for now, I'm just checking its hit points. I have a method in here that allows it to take damage, and then if it takes more damage than it's worth, then it's going to be destroyed. So I'm going to save my script really quickly. I'm going to pop back into Unity. I'm going to go to my prefabs, find that breakable tile, that I have here. And I'm going to set its hit points to 1, meaning if you make one match over it, you can destroy it. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to go back to my board. My logic here is going to be really similar. I have my tile types here, and I already have my kind in, and my kind already includes breakable. So that's part of the logic that I've already implemented. I also am going to I want to look really quickly here. When I'm generating blank spaces here, I'm looking at if it's a blank tile, then I generated the blank tile, or at least I made it so that nothing happened on that tile. What I want to do next here in my generate blanks, actually let's make a new method for it. So let's say public void, this is going to be generate breakable tiles, and I'm going to use a for loop to go through my board layout. So for int I is 0, I is less than board layout dot length I plus plus. So I'm going to look at everything in the board layout. I'm going to say if board layout I dot tile kind is equal to tile kind dot breakable. No, not blank. Breakable. Then what I'm going to want to do here is generate the breakable tile and also assign it to a two-dimensional array. So what I want to do next is I'm going to make another 2D array, and this 2D array is going to be a private background tile, and it's two-dimensional, so I have a comma inside the array, and I'm going to call this breakable tiles. And now that I've created this 2D array, in order for it to actually work, I need to initialize it to have a certain width and length. So I'm going to say breakable tiles is equal to a new background tile array of width versus height. Oop, that's not how you spell height. All right, cool. And semicolon to end my thought. All right. So back down here, let me just comment out my code so that I can keep my head straight. So I'm going to look at all the tiles in the layout. If a tile is a jelly tile, then what I want to do is create a jelly tile at that position. So I'm going to create a new game object. I'm going to say game object tile is equal to, and this is equal to the instantiated. And in order for me to instantiate it, I need to know what I'm instantiating. So I'm going to make a prefab for it. So I'm going to do public game object. We'll call this breakable tile prefab. So then down here, I will instantiate it at breakable tile prefab at board layout I.x. Oops, sorry. I want to make this as a vector separately. So first I'm going to do vector2 temporary position is equal to a new vector2 board layout tile I.x board layout tile I.y, and I'm going to use that temporary position for my instantiate command. Instantiate, remember, takes three parameters. First is what you're going to instantiate. Second is a vector of where you're going to instantiate it, and I'm going to instantiate it at temp position. And third is a rotation, which is a quaternion. So I'm just going to do quaternion.identity for my rotation. Now that creates the game object. So if I go back into Unity here, what I want to do is go to my board. I have my board layout right now, which is my 9 tiles that I want to keep blank. I'm going to add to these 9 tiles though. I don't want dots, I want board layout. I'm going to add, let's make it 12. And when you add to something that's already kind of initialized, it adds those last 3 ones as duplicates of whatever was last. So I'm going to do 1, 5, 1, 6, and 1, 7. Okay, and then these are going to be breakable tiles. Breakable, breakable, breakable. And then close this off. And it needs to know the prefab, so I'll add the prefab to it. So, oh, no, it's not going to work because I forgot to do something. What I forgot to do is actually call this generate breakable tiles method. So I'm going to call it in my setup right after I generate the blank spaces. So I'll generate breakable tiles. All right, so I'm going to save my script again, pop back into Unity. I'll let that compile for just a second, and then I'll hit play. And what'll happen now is my breakable tiles are created, my 3 tiles right here, but nothing's happening with them. There's no breaking going on. So in order to fix that, we need to do a few things. So first of all, we need to make it so that when we break a piece over that breakable tile, we then give that tile damage, which means that we need to have a way of tracking where there are breakable tiles, which is why in the board method, we created this 2-dimensional array of background tiles, which are called breakable tiles. So when you create one, when you generate your breakable tile, what I want to do now is say breakable tiles, and now I need an XY coordinate because this is a 2-dimensional array. So my XY coordinates are going to be board layout I.x, board layout I.y. So copy those, paste them right in here. And well, that's going to be equal to, I can't just set it equal to tile because tile is a game object. And you can't implicitly convert a game object to something of type background tile. And so, see, you cannot implicitly convert type game object to background tile. So what I will have to do is, instead of just getting the tile, I want to get the background tile game object from that. So get a component, background tile, and there we go. Now that puts the tile, the background tile, the breakable jelly, into the array. Now once it's in the array, what I want to do is I want to keep track whenever I'm breaking a piece. So in order to do that, I'm going to scroll down here to my destroy matches at. So in destroy matches at, we're checking to see if it's matched, and then we're checking to see if we need to make bombs. We're instantiating a particle. So before we instantiate a particle, what I want to do here is, does a tile need to break? Pardon me. So what I want to do is check if breakable tiles and column row is not equal to null, meaning if there is a breakable tile there, then I want to do breakable tiles column row dot take damage, and I want it to take 1 as its damage, and then I want to remove it from the array. Breakable tiles, actually I don't need to do that in here. Let me just save this really quickly. Alright, cool. So let me comment this too. If it does give 1 damage. All right, so I'm going to save my script. I'm going to pop back into Unity here. I'm going to let that compile for a second. And then I'll hit play once it's done. All right. So pieces fall in. I'm going to make a match. And there we go. It's gone. I can make a match here. I can make a match here. And there my jelly tiles are gone. Now, if you wanted to, you could make it so that your jelly tiles have more than one hit point, like they do in Candy Crush. In which case, you would want some sort of method to make them lighter. So, like, one thing that you could do here really quickly, if you want to be able to have them have multiple hit points, I'm going to create a reference to the sprite renderer on that jelly. So I'm going to say private sprite renderer, and I'll just call this sprite. And then I'll make a start method so I can assign this. Okay, and I'll say sprite equals get component sprite renderer. And then I'll make another little method here to make it lighter. So we'll call this doesn't need to be public, so we'll do void make lighter. And what I want to do is I want to take that sprite renderer and decrease its alpha value. So what I'm going to do is say, let's make it like 50% of what it was. So color equals sprite renderer. So I'm going to take the current color of the sprite renderer. No, not sprite renderer, sorry. Sprite dot color. So I want to take the current color. Then I want to get the current color's alpha value. So I'm going to say float new alpha is equal to color dot alpha. And I'm going to take that and multiply it by 0.5f. Take the new alpha value and cut it in half. Should probably scroll up here. So my new alpha is my previous alpha times 0.5, so it's half of what it was. And then I'm going to say my sprite no, I need just sprite dot color is equal to a new color, and that new color is going to be color dot r, color dot g, color color dot b, and then instead of using the color's alpha value, I'm going to use new alpha. And ta-da! So after I take damage, I'm going to make lighter. Now this is completely optional. You do not have to do this. But if I jump back into Unity now, and I'm going to go visit my breakable tile prefab, I'm going to change my hit points from 1, let's do 3. So now you have to break it 3 times in front. So the user would know that if it's full white like this, then it needs as many hits as it can get. Once you have a match over it, then it goes to 50% opacity. And now it's at 25% opacity. And let's get a third hit on one of those. Now it's at 0 opacity because it's gone. These two have different amounts of hits. Now, you could also accomplish the same thing by changing the sprite. Maybe you want it to look cracked or something. But yeah, so for the sake of making things easier though, I want to go back to my board script here, and back in my destroy matches at, let's say if breakable tiles column row dot hit points are less than or equal to 0, then I want to remove it from the array. Breakable tiles, column row equals null. All right, so, okay, cool. This should be okay. We might get a weird null reference exception error there. Let's test it out. But it should execute that method before another update tick. So we should be fine, but let's see. So, all right, cool. Cool. Let's see here. Let's just do this one. And let's get all the greens out. All right, cool. We didn't have any. Let's just get rid of that last jelly. Okay, cool. Nice. So there we go. We've got a system where we now have some breakable tiles in here. Now again, just like before, you probably don't want these breakable tiles to be laid out randomly. You instead probably want to lay these out by hand so you can make some kind of neat patterns. And then again, it's all going as part of this board layout here. So again, maybe get out some graph paper and draw out what you want your board to look like. Okay, so I think we've gotten all of the gameplay elements that I really wanted to get in here. We have our match 4s, our match 5s, we have our bombs, we have our blank spaces, and we have our breakable tiles. So what I would want to work on next is one last gameplay element, and then we can start adding some polish to this. So the last gameplay element I want to add is the ability for it to detect if there's a deadlock on the board, if there's no more matches, and then after that, the ability to give a move suggestion to the player. So that's going to be the next video that's coming, is detecting if there's a deadlock and what to do if there is a deadlock. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments down below. You can send me a message on Twitter, or you can follow me on Twitter to find out when I post my new videos. And yeah, have yourselves a wonderful day.